The year is 1815. The face of Europe is changing. Liberalism, the idea that everyone is entitled to the rights of life, liberty, and property, and that society should strive for equality, has swept through Europe because of the Napoleonic Wars, the byproduct of the French Revolution. Europe is also in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. Cottage industry has turned to factories, and along with it, the growing stratification of social classes has begun, with the bourgeoisie taking a dominant role. This is what leads us to the age of dual revolution, the beginning of the 19th century. The growth of the industrial middle class, a social change, along with it brings us political change, a demand for representative government. The demands of peasants and the proletariat, this new economic idea, this new economic place, the proletariat, this new economic role, I should say, of the proletariat, demands socialism, a distribution of wealth more evenly to increase their position in society. Intellectual changes that will accompany the dual revolution will be defined by four isms: conservatism, a direct reaction to liberalism; nationalism, the idea that all people who speak the same languages and share a common nationality should also share a common political state; socialism, the idea of the even redistribution of wealth; and of course classical liberalism, rights to life, liberty, and property. So how did the victorious allies against Napoleon fashion a general peace settlement, and how did Metternich uphold a conservative European order? The pendulum of history, in Napoleon's case, swung far to the left, far to the liberal side, and now with this age of dual revolution, the beginning of the age of conservatism, Metternich will swing the pendulum far to the right in what he calls the concert of Europe. In 1815, the Quadruple Alliance, responsible for defeating Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars, Great Britain, Prussia, Russia, and Austria, all met at what we call the Congress of Vienna to determine Europe's future. The goal now is to maintain peace between nations for as long as possible. Now, Napoleon completely disrupted the European balance of power. In order to to reestablish the European balance of power, the Quadruple Alliance felt that it would be wise to be lenient on France. They knew that France was going to be a powerful country, and they didn't want to be too hard on it. So since they agreed to restore the Bourbon dynasty with Louis XVIII, they didn't have to pay war reparations, and they were allowed to keep their borders of 1792. That they took some land away from Austria, but Austria's like, cool, just keep it. We just want to move on with our lives. However, in addition to being lenient to France, they created a defense. The Dutch monarchy established itself over the land of Belgium and Holland, and Prussia gained more territory just to the east of France. So now there is a buffer zone, if you will, between France and Central Europe. The actors and interests of the Congress of Vienna are Robert Castlereagh, Charles Talleyrand, and Clemens von Metternich. And all of them, they say, we all want the countries to have equal political and military strength, at least the countries that we think should be countries. Balance of power, huzzah! And what they mean is the countries that they think should be countries, right, should have equal political and military strength. But everybody else who wants their own country, well, that would disrupt the balance of power, so we're going to repress them. We have intervention and repression. The Holy Alliance was established, Prussia, Russia, and Austria, and they were established in the East here to repress liberalism in Central and Eastern Europe. In fact, Karl Marx actually mentions the Holy Alliance in the Communist Manifesto. In Spain and the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, the people actually forced these rulers to grant them constitutions until a conference at Treptow prompted Austrian forces to actually restore both monarchies by force. So the people's interests there were repressed. They did not get to keep their constitution. However, they were not successful at stopping Latin American republics overseas from breaking away from Spain. In Europe, though, the balance of power, these conservative goals were very effective. The German Confederation was defined by 38 independent states led by Austria and Prussia. The German Confederation is what is left of the Holy Roman Empire. These 38 independent states were subjected to the Carlsbad Decrees. These decrees attacked the free press, free ideas in schools, and they set out anti-liberal spies and informers to repress any semblance of liberalism. This is taking place again largely in Central Europe. Now, who is Metternich? Metternich is considered to be I suppose he's like the father of conservatism. I guess the grandfather of conservatism would be Edmund Burke, the original writer against the French Revolution. Metternich is really like conservatism's daddy. Conservatism is founded on the belief that tradition is the basic source of human institutions. He romanticized, and other conservatives romanticized, pre-1789 society. They're like, oh, back in the day when everything was like all happy and shiny and pretty. Okay, there was the monarchy. Yay for monarchy. Everything was nice and peaceful back then. We had nice bureaucracy. And oh, the aristocracy was so great, and oh, those nice, respectful commoners who were just happy to have what little bread they had. Everybody was cool back then. So that wasn't actually how things were, but they romanticized it. They made it seem nice. They felt that liberalism caused suffering. You can imagine why. This is happening immediately after the Reign of Terror and all the Napoleonic Wars, and they're like, oh, this is all liberalism's fault. Oh, liberalism is no good. Metternich himself especially detested, really just was disgusted with the idea of national self-determination. He's like, no, people shouldn't just get to make up their own countries. We already have this nice balance of power. Self-determination might lead to war. Now, this was especially a huge threat in the Austrian Empire. The Austrian Empire was made up of Germans, Czechs, Magyars, which are Hungarians, and a whole mix of Italian, Romanian, and Slavic peoples. So each of these groups will want their own countries. Just like today, we have the Czech Republic, we have Germany, we have Hungary, we have Italy, we have Romania, etc., etc., etc. Metternich will lose in the long run. By the time we get to the 20th century, all these people will get self-determination, but here in the 19th century, they are repressing these people. So let's answer the question then. How did the victorious Allies fashion a general peace settlement, and how did Metternich uphold a conservative European order? Well, they were able to attain peace by being lenient, nice to France, but also creating buffer states. Remember the Dutch kingdom, territorial defense against France. They upheld the conservative order by intervening in uprisings in Spain and in the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. They swept away any hope of constitutions there. And then in Germany, in the German Confederation, basically Central Europe, they issued the Carlsbad Decrees, which stifled liberalism. Now, what were the basic tenets of liberalism, nationalism, and socialism, and what groups were most affected by these ideologies? Well, liberalism, as you know, is defined by representative government, equality before the law, individual freedoms, and laissez-faire economics, Adam Smith's style of economics. By 1815, there was only liberalism evident in Great Britain and in France, which both had constitutional monarchies. Laissez-faire economics powered the Industrial Revolution, the idea of competition and capital. By the early 19th century, liberals wanted representative government with property requirements for voting. So they didn't want everybody to vote, they just wanted some people to vote. They identified, I'm sorry, not they, but liberalism then is identified with the middle class after 1815. So bourgeoisie is all about liberalism. Other more progressive people in Europe were influenced by Jacksonian democracy, but they didn't see that as being super effective in Europe. They're like, yay, that's really great what America's doing, but not quite ready for it in Europe yet. So then what were the two key issues that separated liberals from radicals? We'll get to that in just a moment. Nationalism. The ideology of nationalism has immediate origins in the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. People were really upset at the idea of Napoleon rolling into their countries and forcing French ideals on them. This made people feel very strongly about their own cultural unity, people who shared a common language, a common history, and generally common territory. European nationalists wanted to take this cultural unity and turn it into political unity by creating their own states. For example, the Hungarians wanted, no surprise, a country called Hungary. The Czechs wanted a country just for the Czechs. That's what nationalism, self-determination, that's what that all means. Okay, so how does this happen in practice? It was promoted through increased communication of industrialization. More people were educated, and up until about 1850, nationalism is associated with liberalism or radical democratic republicanism. Okay, there's this we-they kind of outlook, and the people who shared common cultural unity saw themselves as like, it's us versus them, okay? Now, this national idea of superiority, like, oh, well, we're better than those people, is going to actually undermine freedom and peace and lead to aggression. And the biggest example of that is going to be in World War I. So again, why is suddenly everybody concerned with nationalism? Well, it's because of the Napoleonic Wars. So what happened back in 1789 that leads up to Napoleon will actually be a major cause of World War I all the way in the 20th century. Crazy. So who are the socialists? Now, Karl Marx is not by any means the first socialist. We begin first with the French utopian socialists. Laissez-faire, according to these people, was leading to selfish individualism, like Victor predicted in class. Economic planning, just like we saw during the Reign of Terror, should be rationally organized and not formed by destructive competition. They looked back at the Reign of Terror and said, well, it kind of sucked that it killed everybody, but you know what? Everybody ate. Nobody was starving. That wasn't such a bad thing, you know? They wanted to decrease class inequalities, or rather the inequalities between social classes, and close the gap between the rich and the poor. So if that means the rich are a little less rich, but the poor are a little more rich, we're good with that, according to the utopian socialists. There should be state regulation, they said, of private property and community ownership. The most famous utopian socialist actually came from an aristocratic background, and his name was Count Henry de Saint-Simon. He advocated for proper social organization between what he called the parasites and the doers. The parasites, because he is speaking on behalf of the proletariat, he's going to call the parasites the bourgeoisie, and the doers then, of course, are the proletariat, the people actually working to make the so-called parasites wealthy. The doers should be the one, he said, to plan the economy, public works projects, and investment banks, and that every social institution should make it its goal to improve conditions for the poor, because it's the poor, right, who actually make everybody else wealthy. And he was quoted as saying, "The age of gold is before us." He's like, this is how things should turn out. Another important socialist to consider is Charles Fourier. He was a socialist utopian is what that should say, of mathematically planned communities. It's like, you know what? This is going to work best if we set up these communities of 1,620 people each, which is going to be kind of hard because, you know, people have babies. But hey, it could work, 16, 20 people in each. So he wanted to abolish marriage and just let people have free unions based only on love and sexual freedom. He's like, you shouldn't have to just get married. You should just be with whoever you love. Let's just take society out of marriage and just let people do what they want. He also advocated for liberation of women and workers. Women should have more rights. Workers should have more rights, according to Charles Fourier. Louis Blanc will be very, very important in the revolution of 1830 in France, but we're not there yet. He was a journalist who wrote a publication called Organization of Work, and workers should agitate for universal voting rights, according to him, to peacefully take control of the state. The state then should establish workshops and factories to ensure full employment. So all of these people have these very utopian, or rather hard to achieve in reality, but very, very good intentioned ideas. This guy, I love this guy, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. I love the guy, and I can't even say his name. Isn't that terrible? He wrote this article called "What is Property?" And his big quote is that property is theft. Anything owned is actually just owned because of profits stolen from the worker. If I work 8 hours a day to make widgets, and somebody sells those widgets for money and then buys a car, they're buying that car with the money that I helped that guy make, okay? Workers are the source of wealth. And he feared the power of the state, and he's like, I don't even want socialism. I want there just to be kind of like anarchy. I think people should just like do what they want to feed themselves and move on. Just take the government out of it. So this guy's like way radical. He's an outlier. This was not a common way for people to think. Most people thought a lot more like Saint-Simon and Fourier. So, Marxian socialism. According to Karl Marx, all of history then can be defined through class conflict. Society is split at this time in history between the bourgeoisie, the parasites, and the proletariat, the doers, the workers. The bourgeoisie triumphed over the aristocracy, and just like the bourgeoisie triumphed over the aristocracy, the proletariat then will triumph over the bourgeois in a violent revolution, like the French Revolution. He felt that this critical moment in history was near and coming soon. Profits, just like my friend whose name I can't pronounce here, Karl Marx said that profits were wages, profits were wages stolen from workers, and this combined with England's oppression of factory workers led to Marx's ideas that there needed to be a violent revolution. We'll talk about the Hegelian dialectic in class, so we're going to skip that for right now. So what were the basic tenets of liberalism, nationalism, and socialism, and what groups were most attracted to these? You can see here the basic tenets of liberalism, nationalism, and socialism. Liberalism will associate with the bourgeois, nationalism with ethnic minorities living in larger empires, and of course socialism for the working class and radical democratic Republicans. Love you all. Have a great night.